You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
WCYTV
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. We have quite a bit to dig into this evening and not a lot of time to dig into it. Most of the show revolves around the insanity that continues to break out of the House Democrats. Right now, the House Democrats have absolutely nothing to do. And I do mean nothing to do. The government is shut down. A lot of Republicans are out essentially talking to various constituents back in their home districts. A lot of others are also on special projects for future legislation. And the House has already passed, in a bipartisan measure, the continuing resolution to keep the government open. And so it is the Senate Democrats who are the current holdouts. The best thing for the House Democrats to do right now, right here, at this moment in time, would be to either A, encourage House Democrats and Senate Democrats to support continuing resolutions and keep the government open, and just fight on other things, maybe embrace Mike Lawler of New York's compromise measures on Obamacare. Not in the habit of giving advice to Democrats, but again, this would be a good idea. Number two, if you can't handle that, shut up. The polls for Democrats right now are abysmal. And worse so than yesterday. I mean, it really is appearing like Democrats are shooting for the fabled 0% approval rating, which up until this particular point in time was reserved for the Cracker Barrel rebrand. Now, what am I talking about? The not shutting up and making it worse. That goes to the number 2 Democrat in the House, a lady who you have never heard of in your entire life, from one of the most gerrymandered districts in the country that makes Eastern Europe jealous. This would be Representative Catherine Clark from Massachusetts' 5th Congressional. She is the Democrat whip of the House. And no, I'm not talking about her husband. She has decided in an interview at the end of last week to announce that, yeah, well, you know, there's going to be suffering, but we got to have leverage, don't we? I mean, maybe Americans might suffer in this shutdown eventually, but that's the only leverage we've got at this time. Here's that really horrible moment.
I mean, shutdowns are terrible. And of course, there will be, you know, families that are going to suffer. We take that responsibility very seriously. But it is one of the few leverage times we have.
When you say something particularly terrible, you don't need to follow it with a but. Anytime someone says, you know, I'm not racist, but, you know, I mean, we really hate that Americans who are on, you know, particular entitlement programs, or of course our troops or essential employees like air traffic controllers, at some point the money may run out for them. We hate that, but don't do that. Don't do the but. There are a lot of other conjoining words and intros to clauses that one might use. I don't recommend it. And then later on, when she was confronted on CNN, very good pointing out by the anchor over on CNN on this one, she just doubles down and says it's lies. It's all lies.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt just posted a clip of an interview that you did on Fox last week. You were answering a question from Fox's Chad Pergram about blame for the shutdown. I want to look at the post here.
I mean, shutdowns are terrible. And of course, there will be, you know, families that are going to suffer. We take that responsibility very seriously. But it is one of the few leverage times we have.
Leavitt is looking especially at that last bit you said there, saying that Democrats, quote, are now admitting that they are intentionally causing American families to suffer with their reckless government shutdown. What's your response to that?
Well, that is right out of her playbook of half-truths, taking things out of context, and not being straight with the American people.
Yeah, nothing says out of context like, well, you know, we really don't like the American suffering, but this is the only leverage that we've got. There's not a lot of extra context you can staple onto that one. So very, very bad look. Not going to help. Not a good time for it. The rest of the House is focused on essentially 3 or 4 things on the left side of the aisle, and it gets worse from there. Hakeem Jeffries is throwing his latest hissy fit on the ballroom. Yes, that's right. The facade of the East Wing, which was, again, built by Teddy Roosevelt, renovated by Franklin Delano Roosevelt when, you know, he slapped in a swimming pool and other shenanigans in White House excitements and, frivolities from swimming pools to basketball courts and bowling alleys. It's a bunch of boring offices otherwise, as someone who's been over to the East Wing of the White House. Hakeem Jeffries, though, has, I guess, all of the red yarn and corkboard conspiracy theories out and ready to go again. This is what he's chosen to focus on right now when the Democrats really need to shut up.
Donald Trump is once again preparing to fly out of the country. The East Wing of the White House is being demolished so that Donald Trump can construct a ballroom where he will be celebrated like a king.
What? First of all, first of all, building an event space does not mean you are going to build a throne room. I think he's confusing medieval architecture just for a moment here. Number two, the ballroom, I believe, is not even expected to be finished until either right before he's ready to leave the White House or into the next presidential term. So, I mean, as far as Donald Trump being celebrated like a king, if it's in the next administration, big womp womp for you there, Hakeem. It just doesn't work out. Now, he's not the only one who's losing his marbles about these particular things. You have all kinds of media nonsense. And I promised yesterday that I wasn't going to make you guys sit through a clip on The View. But as media accountability is kind of a core part of what we do here at the Tony Kinnett Cast, just blatantly lying about the source of the ballroom funding and things comes into it. Here's Whoopi Goldberg, just, again, outright lying on network TV about sources for American projects, in this case, the ballroom.
So this will also be decided. This is the part that really tickles me. It's going to be decided by some of the same Justice Department lawyers who worked with him on these past cases. So Americans, the question is, are you on board with all of this? This is like a cash grab. Yeah. And your taxes are probably going to be paying for that.
You probably couldn't hear it through the unhealthy wheezing, but your taxes are probably going to be paying for that ballroom. No, it's a privately funded project. Again, if you're going to go after Trump, by all means, feel free to do so. He's the president. You want to get on media and complain about the president. People have been doing that for a long dang time. But try not to say things that are instantly slappable. And by the way, just to make this very clear, Trump then got up in Jeff Mason over at Reuters, the White House correspondent at Reuters, tried to throw this in the president's face. It really, really didn't go well. Again, White House correspondents, do a little bit of research before you ask the president questions. It's not Biden. You're not just going to get him yelling soda and threatening to throw you across the room. Here's the president in Reuters.
I just want a quick follow-up on that question. You're responding to people who say that you haven't been transparent enough about this.
I haven't been transparent?
That's some of your critics feel it's
I've shown this to everybody that would listen. Third-rate reporters didn't see it because they didn't look. You're a third-rate reporter, always have been. So third-rate reporters.
By the way, if you didn't hear it, as soon as Trump called him a third-rate reporter, he's like, yikes.
Reporters didn't look, but anybody that asked, these pictures have been in newspapers. They've been all over the place, and we're very proud of it. It's gotten great reviews. It's gotten really great reviews. So
I'm just going to make this case right here, right now, and then kind of done on the ballroom stuff for the evening. It just looks like a classical kind of American structure, like a stateroom ballroom. Again, I don't see what the big issue is about putting one of those at the White House. All of the liberal journalists in Washington are losing it. They are genuinely losing it. There is weeping, gnashing of teeth, renting of sackcloth. I saw one journalist running down the street covered in ashes. It was really weird. Somebody tried sacrificing a goat over on Mass Ave. It's a very weird time in D.C. Unfortunately, though, it just makes sense for the White House to actually have projects that do, in fact, celebrate the United States of America. There's a class to the presidency having a ballroom. That's okay. As the guy who has watched several meetings in the last 2 weeks of the president lounging with world leaders in the two yellow wingback chairs over at the White House, while Marco Rubio sits on the couch scowling because he's probably going to have to be appointed to be the mayor of New York City at this point, along with his other 8,000 jobs. Yeah, I think a ballroom or a stateroom actually kind of makes a little bit of sense here. Now, swinging over from that to what Trump was talking about today to the press, he has now announced that he is canceling a major meeting with Vladimir Putin. We got to continue over with the live stream on this. Radio crew, we got to send you to the commercial side of things. We'll be back in a second for you. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Now, on the presidential foreign affairs side of things, while the media is losing their mind about ballrooms and about ICE, which we're going to get to here in a second, the president is addressing some major international situations, including canceling an upcoming conference with Vladimir Putin of Russia.
Big one. We canceled the meeting with President Putin. It didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel like we were going to get to the place we have to get, so I canceled it. But we'll do it in the future. But next week will be...
So there are a couple of things that matter regarding canceling a meeting. I mean, Trump has a lot of international meetings. Why does this one matter? Well, the United States, through the U.S. Department of the Treasury's Office of Foreign Affairs, is now imposing further sanctions as a result of, from the State Department, quote, Russia's lack of serious commitment to a peace process to end the war in Ukraine. Today's actions increase pressure on Russia's energy sector and degrade the Kremlin's ability to raise revenue for its war machine and support its weakened economy. Now, the two primary Russian oil companies, two oil giants with Russia, that are sending out as much black gold as they can across the world are Rosneft and Lukoil. These particular organizations are a huge issue. Again, India has now come back and said they're not going to be buying Russian oil. This is the crux of the Russian economy. Now, when the Soviet Union fell, there were essentially two hinge points for the Russian economy. Three, if you count mail-order babushkas. The first was shipping arms to Africa. Well, Africa's kind of saturated with arms at this point. If you don't believe me, look at the AK-47 that sits on the flag of Mozambique. All right, they're everywhere. They've already sold all the arms they really can at this point. That leaves oil. Well, if the United States puts further sanctions on Russia, there's really only one other kind of heavy force tactic that the administration has. And this would be giving either additional defense weapons, like Tomahawk missiles, to Ukraine, or on the other side, it would be essentially letting Ukraine fully off the hook and saying, prosecute this war to the fullest. The Wall Street Journal reported this morning that the Trump administration had lifted key restrictions on Ukraine's use of long-range missiles, enabling Kyiv to step up attacks inside Russia. Now, there's a bit of an issue with that, because this was yet another one of those unnamed senior super-duper sources on the inside of my trench coat kind of articles. And the administration took immediate umbrage. Do you like that little fancy word for the day? Took umbrage with this particular article. Trump tweeted out, "The Wall Street Journal story on the USA's approval of Ukraine being allowed to use long-range missiles deep into Russia is fake news." He continues, "The U.S. has nothing to do with those missiles, wherever they may come from, or what Ukraine does with them." Now, this brings us into a really interesting conversation. A really interesting conversation regarding how the press is getting its sources regarding the Pentagon, the State Department, and when the United States chooses to use certain kinds of leverage in foreign affairs. But we're going to get to that, because that's where we get into the controversial fun stuff. First, though, the Trump administration is clearly moving to the Gaza-Hamas approach regarding Putin. Trump has been nice. He sent Steve Witkoff, producer Nick, I don't know what, like 3, 4, 5 times now to Dmitry Medvedev. I mean, Steve Witkoff has more American Airlines miles at this point than the guy who came up with the rewards card. So the Trump administration's played nice. Now, well, if you, like he let Israel off the hook and start prosecuting the war to the fullest, if he lets Ukraine off the hook and start really slinging some things around, that could get a little uncomfy for Putin, whose situation in the Kremlin does grow a little bit more tenuous. So we'll have to see kind of how that meters out. That will bring us to 5 times. And that's some quick research. Thanks, producer Nick. We've got a lot to cover regarding the White House press pass situation and the Pentagon's press pass situation, excuse me. I know that may sound like something to hit the snooze button over, but in the kind of politico side of things, in the journalism side of things on the left and the right, it has become one of the key controversies over the last couple of weeks and has resulted in some really fun and also aggravating arguments. We have a new statement on that, a new policy over at the Daily Signal we think that is pretty important to dig into. It all essentially goes to one important thing, which is narco-terrorists and their boats at the bottom of the Caribbean. We're going to talk about that as well. So don't go anywhere. We got to bring the radio crew back from commercial. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. Another narco-terrorist boat has in fact been promoted to submarine by the United States military. Here is, of course, the declassified footage that looks really nice. You see the boat, it's moving on through the beautiful waters of the Southern Caribbean, and then presto, it meets a little kinetic action, I believe, as the particular military powers that be call it. This is the 8th boat. Now, by the way, Rand Paul, when he heard about this, was really grumpy. Here was Rand Paul on Piers Morgan when he found out senator and libertarian kind of Republican from Kentucky.
Number one, there is no fentanyl made in Venezuela. Not just a little bit, there's none being made in Venezuela. These are outboard boats that, in order for them to get to Miami, would have to stop and refuel 20 times. They're in all likely going to Trinidad and Tobago, which is an island right off of the coast of Venezuela. So there's a lot of reasons to be worried about this. But number one is the broader principle of when can you kill people indiscriminately? When you're at war. That's why when we declare war, it's supposed to be done by Congress. It's supposed to be thoughtful. It's supposed to be debated. And we're not supposed to do it willy-nilly. And then when you have war, you just kill people in the war zone. And even then there are rules of engagement. But interdicting drugs has always been a criminal activity and a criminal anti-crime sort of activity.
Here's the issue with that. The issue with that kind of naivety is that you really stop getting into the basic just neighborhood guy peddling drugs on the corner situation when the organizations that are sending them are in conjunction with human and major drug trafficking that is resulting in the deaths of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Americans, when they are carrying fully automatic rifles that do in fact originate from places like China and Russia, when they are carrying secondary military equipment, and when they fire on United States armed forces if they get the chance. Also, as far as the outboard motor situation, given some of the explosion patterns in those particular boats, well, they might in fact have enough fuel on board to make it to, say, Cuba. Not just Trinidad and Tobago, those kinds of things. So that brings us to the Trump administration making it very clear its policy going forward on narco-terrorism, and then the Pentagon. Here's the President of the United States.
Yeah, well, I mean, the question is, bottom line, these are drug boats. If people want to stop seeing drug boats blow up, stop sending drugs to the United States.
But does it matter if it's in the United States?
Well, these are all in international waters.
The boat. Do a strike in the United States, or if
well, that's a different matter. Now you're talking about a law enforcement matter. In this particular case, there are people traveling on international waters headed towards the United States with hostilities in mind, which includes flooding our country with dangerous, deadly drugs, and they're going to be stopped. And that's what's happening. And in the case last week, you saw there was a submarine. It was a submarine. It was a submersible. That's a drug boat all the way through. We know what these boats are. The president just said it. We tracked them from the very beginning. We know who's on them, who they are, where they're coming from, what they have on them. If you're running drug boats, you're in grave danger.
That's the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor acting, Marco Rubio. The president said a lot of the same thing.
This is a national security problem. They killed 300,000 people last year. These drugs coming in. They killed 300,000 Americans last year, and that gives you legal authority. We have a national security, really, I will say this. When you look at the people we're dealing with, and we know them, we know the people coming in, we know the boats, we know everything else. We're allowed to do it. It's in international waters. If we don't do it, we're going to lose hundreds of thousands of people.
He's correct. He is. And I'm sorry, national security does in fact rest under the purview of the President of the United States as the chief executive. And if you are coming to the United States, you're in international waters or you're in U.S. waters with intent to cause harm to Americans, and as many people like to get out there and say that the intelligence services of the world, they couldn't possibly know what these guys are. They couldn't possibly know. We couldn't know unless we stop and ask them kindly. You cannot simultaneously argue that the intelligence services of the United States are so deeply masterminded, insidious that they're controlling everything at all times and they know everything about you and they can read your thoughts and MK Ultra your actions, but they can't tell what a drug boat is or isn't. The president goes on to explain that a lot of this, though, the reason the press is so testy about this comes down to the Pentagon. There has been a major change in policy over at the Department of War. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has encouraged new policies that have essentially crippled the ability of the press to encourage members of the military to violate laws regarding classification and the revealing of U.S. secrets and national security that put U.S. service members and its allies at consistent risk. And by the way, that's a phrase that's often used in media in general, that when you actually break it down means your brothers, your fathers, your sons, your daughters, your mothers, and your sisters in uniform are put at risk when over the last 30, 40, 50 years, members of the press have wandered around the Pentagon unfettered, have developed these little private sources with members who are actively wearing the uniform under orders by their superiors not to divulge certain kinds of information to the press, and then reveal through various leaks information about potential U.S. strikes against terrorist groups, potential U.S. strikes against active combatants and enemies during the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, the Gulf War, U.S. operations in Syria, in Serbia. Leaks that have gotten U.S. soldiers killed consistently. And so, after decades of leaks and bad actors, the Pentagon, the Department of War, has now begun to restrict what? Restrict that the press can report on the Pentagon? No. A new series of guidelines says that if you want a pass to come into the Pentagon and ask questions from the Pentagon directly and be assigned perhaps to an individual who can give you more details and answer that question, you need to agree to a certain set of terms. One of those terms is no longer are you going to be allowed to be the unfettered child running around Walmart because their mother doesn't want to keep after them. In this case, running around the Pentagon. You no longer have that right to do so. Number two, you have to wear a press badge identifying you as press at all times. You say, why does that particularly matter? Because in the Pentagon, there are individuals who are walking around that are not just in the military, but might be possibly contractors, defense contractors who might be carrying things that are highly classified. They might be members of government. And it would be rather ridiculous for you as a member of the press to slip silently into a meeting you have no business being in due to classification or security standards. And the members of the press, I've seen some, okay, well, we were already wearing our press badges anyway. There are multiple stories over the last couple of decades in which members of the press have not always been very open about being members of the press and walking around with certain recorders on. That is a national security threat. And then last but certainly not least, if you do, in fact, have some kind of classified information or a story at hand, you are at least expected, if you have a Pentagon press badge, to go to the Pentagon and ask for a comment before you release the story. We're going to get to that in a second, because here at the Daily Signal, while a lot of outlets on the left and the right, a lot of outlets have turned in their press badge and they walked out together, everyone from, I shouldn't say everyone, many from CNN to the MSNBC crew over on the left, to more defense-specific publications like Defense One, to right-wing publications or publications that lean to the right like Fox News and Newsmax, have said, nope, we're not doing it. Some find it press censorship. They've engaged in good faith discussions. Some of them have engaged in bad faith discussions. And it has unfortunately caused a significant rift even on the right, among journalists and independent and corporate journalists over on the right, regarding covering the Pentagon. Radio crew, we have to send you over to commercial. We're going to continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Now, for the Daily Signal side of things, I want to make this explicitly clear. We have spent an entire week going over every single section of this policy. We've spoken with our legal team. We've spoken with external legal teams. We've spoken with individuals over the Department of War, trusted industry colleagues, national security experts. individuals who crafted this policy at the Department of War and explained that if we at the Daily Signal signed on to this agreement and accepted a press badge from the Department of War, what would that mean for our reporting? If I was to go to a Media Row event at the Department of War and I was to sit down with, for example, the assistant to the Secretary of War, Sean Parnell, I was to sit down and ask him questions. What are the rules that would be in play? What kind of questions could and couldn't be asked? And we were given a series of well-cited answers based on the legal policy provided in the documents that I believe, and my colleagues at the Daily Signal, our president, Rob Bluey, our writing and editing staff, our legal staff as well, have made the decision to accept the terms of the Pentagon and accept a press pass and report to the Pentagon. And here's why. From our president, Rob Bluey. Some publications have fallen on either side of the debate after good faith consideration. Others appear to be deliberately misrepresenting this policy. Despite the protest of some members of the Pentagon press corps, the public deserves truthful reporting on national security. Now is a critical time to do that work. With this in mind, the Daily Signal has decided to obtain credentials for the Pentagon. This decision came after consulting legal advisors, etc. I just explained that. The Daily Signal holds itself to the highest standards of journalism. Our duty is to truthfully report on national security, striking the proper balance between access and accountability. That is not negotiable. There is no situation in which the press should have completely unfettered access to the Pentagon. None. There is no situation in which the Pentagon and the US government should be completely opaque to the press. But there is no situation in which both sides are going to be eternally happy. Some of the issues right now are significant national security issues, and the press has no business sitting in group chats and leaking those information pieces to the press. They have no business asking members of the military or staff at the Department of War to provide information on background or off the record that could put U.S. interests and U.S. servicemen and women in harm's way. And to be completely clear, if there is anything in our agreement with the Pentagon that we find to be distasteful, if we're asked to obscure any kind of a story, then we'll turn in our badge and we'll report that to you. Right now, I see a couple of outlets that have also taken this pledge to go in and report at the Pentagon to the rest of the country. And if we find anything disturbing or unethical, we'll report that to you, our viewers, our listeners, and readers. Now, there are two very quick common criticisms of this particular policy that I do want to dive into, and I want to answer honestly here. So the first, there are individuals who have suggested that if you try to talk to anyone in the Pentagon about anything whatsoever, then you could be labeled as a security risk and your press badge revoked. This is not true. If I reach out to someone in the Pentagon and I say, hey, I have heard that there are concerns about, for example, the National Guard going to Portland. Does the United States currently have plans to send the National Guard into Portland? That's not an issue. That's not a problem. That's not going to get you labeled a security risk. However, if you make the decision to ask someone in the Pentagon staff, hey, why don't you just slip a little of this classified information over my way and I won't tell anyone you sent it over. You're now asking that individual to violate the law. And you may have your press badge revoked because you are now engaging in actively leaking secrets for the national security of the United States, which I'm sorry, as a member of the press, you don't have some special magical superpower to violate the security of the United States. Number two, there is an argument that everything that you report must be run by the Pentagon before you publish it. Like they have to approve it as some kind of authoritarian regime. Before you report from the Pentagon, it has to be approved. That is not the case. According to the documents, and I went over them again once more right before we hopped on the air, the documentation from the Pentagon specifically states in the policy that if there is anyone in the Pentagon that has commented on your story or you're reporting on a story on the Pentagon, you're expected to ask the Pentagon for comment to confirm or deny the accusations or the allegations you are putting in your story before it's published. And the question I have for those that have an issue with that is, Are you not doing that like in other journalistic practices and stories? Because if there was ever anyone that I had a story about that I did not reach out to for comment before we released that story, my editors would breathe fire down my neck and up my back. It is basic journalistic courtesy. Very, very basic journalistic courtesy. Very basic journalistic ethics and a legal expectation that you reach out to comment. I don't find an issue with that. Now, last and not least, there are some out there who are suggesting that, well, the press has been involved in making sure that the public knew how bad the Vietnam War was being screwed up and how bad the Afghanistan war was being screwed up. Absolutely, they have. Like I said, it is a duty of the press to keep the government accountable. Absolutely. However, that must also live at the very same time in the very same room with keeping our troops and the interests of the United States safe. And so you must strike a balance. You must strike a balance. Because the same press that kept the United States government accountable for certain actions in the Vietnam War completely screwed up the Gulf War, and is one of the reasons that Saddam Hussein stayed alive as long as he did into the Iraq War, and has consistently gotten U.S. servicemen and women killed. So, as far as we are here at the Daily Signal, we believe it is incumbent on us to maintain transparency about why we are accepting a press pass at the Pentagon. Because right now there are a series of operations that do in fact need comment, while maintaining the fact that no, we're not going to send out national security secrets, nor are we going to ask members of the Department of War to break the law. So, those things said, we are going to shift over to a particular interesting series of discussions with the House Democrat Oversight Committee just doxing the Immigration Customs Enforcement officers, the complete opposite of any kind of security or safety. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
The Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. The House Democrats made a very stupid decision amidst, again, a time when the best move is just to shut up, to go after the Immigration Customs Enforcement officials with a doxing website of their own. If you will recall, before we even get to the ICE doxing website of the House Oversight Committee on the Democrat side of the aisle, previously, there are individuals who carried out domestic terror attacks on ICE facilities around this country, including in Texas, that used other Immigration Customs Enforcement tracking and doxing applications as part of their means of preparing to carry out those domestic terror attacks and ambushes and shootings that not only were attempting to kill ICE officers, but did, in fact, kill detainees at the ICE facilities. So here is the ridiculously unintelligent House Democrat crew, who I guess just doesn't want to win any election ever on the Democrats. Here you go.
Next couple of weeks, the Oversight Committee will be launching on their website a master ICE tracker, where we're going to be essentially tracking every single instance that we can verify that the community will be able to send us information on.
There you go. I mean, not politically intelligent whatsoever. Again, amidst the series of attacks that are currently being carried out against Immigration Customs Enforcement officials. Now, this brings us to, again, what is ICE actually up to right now? What are federal law enforcement dealing with? Well, right now in New York City on Canal Street, Immigration Customs Enforcement and Border Patrol have just finished up a huge raid a huge raid. And I believe producer Nick was telling me that there were journalists that were on site that actually went there before any raid was supposed to take place. And so what we ended up seeing were a string of videos in which ICE actually shows up while they're filming on the street and being harassed. We're going to talk about that here in a couple of minutes. And began arresting individuals on the street. Here's some of that footage. Again, we're keeping the volume on this footage a little bit lower because there are some spicy words that we're trying not to get fined for. And of these individuals who were arrested, Department of Homeland Security announced that 9 of these individuals that were arrested had violent rap sheets, including robbery, burglary, domestic violence, assaulting law enforcement, counterfeiting, drug trafficking, drug possession, and forgery. Now, one of these individuals goes by the name Mamadou Ndoye. And it just so happens that, what was it? Was it a couple of days before or was it hours before the Nick Shirley video? I think it was maybe a day before or perhaps a few hours prior. This Mamadou Ndoye was harassing Nick Shirley. Again, the language is so terrible, we can't show you this particular clip. I apologize. It's not even worth bleeping out. It would just be one continuous censor tone in which he essentially said, bleep this, bleep you, bleep that. You come up basically getting in his face for just having your phone and camera out recording it all, which, by the way, in public spaces, you are very much within your legal right to do. He has since been arrested by the Department of Homeland Security. He's a criminal illegal alien from Mali, issued a final order of removal by an immigration judge in 2008, has previously been arrested for crimes including assault, reckless endangerment, counterfeiting third degree, unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, criminal sale of narcotics, possessing a controlled substance, possession of marijuana for sale, and making false reports to law enforcement, and of course, resisting arrest. The Democrats are losing their minds over these particular ICE raids, while at the same time, the ICE raids are picking up violent criminals, not disappearing abuela. Now, that brings us over to Los Angeles, where you currently have activists that are running around yelling, if ICE comes back here, they better be careful because they're not the only ones with guns.
Don't forget where you're standing. This is South Central Los Angeles. They are not the only ones with guns in this city. They're not the only ones, and don't forget that. And I don't say that because we're calling for violence. I'm saying that because the people have every right to defend themselves against masked, unidentified gunmen with AR-15s and other military rifles. The people have every right.
All right, the AR-15 is not a military rifle. Yawn. Number 2, you saying we also have guns. Why would you say that? Oh, because you intend to what? Use that against federal law enforcement for upholding federal law? Not a smart move. A dangerous move. A disgusting and disturbing move, perchance. I very, very much do not recommend it. But the biggest reason right now that the country is still going through a series of very important immigration customs enforcement operations, the reason that it is inherent on the national security of this country for ICE, for Border Patrol, for the ancillary Department of Transportation and the Department of Justice in general, alongside the Department of Homeland Security, to continue these operations is because, yet again, California. It's always down to either California or Minnesota. This is perhaps one of the most enraging stories since the last time this happened because California issued one of these commercial driver's licenses. So, an individual, a CDL holder, a commercial driver's license holder in California, killed 3 in a horrendous semi-accident where he just drives right through these vehicles on the interstate. It's a horrifying clip. Drives right through people, not paying attention, or perhaps stoned or drunk out of his gourd or asleep at the wheel. Drives right through individuals on the interstate. Horrible situation. 3 dead out of that. Now, here's the fun part. And by the fun part, I'm being extremely sarcastic, of course. But the little awkward, sneaky side of California justice does in fact come into play here. Because what's the first question on your mind after seeing that a semi-driver drove through a series of parked vehicles and yet another CDL-based accident that it results in death here in the United States in a perfect weather condition? Was he illegal? Is he one of the individuals that California has given a driver's license and a commercial driver's license to, despite being an illegal immigrant? Or perhaps not being an immigrant who just can't pass written or English portions of the test? What's going on here? It's a little suspicious. And at this point, you would expect, like every other accident in the United States, what's the very first thing that comes out after something like this? The police department in the area, the officials, release information showing, hey, guess what? This is the individual. These are the crimes this individual has been accused of. They are now in custody. Then they release the mugshot. They release the name. Then they release the mugshot. Right now, California is obscuring this individual's identity. That's a big red flag. Because when is it incumbent on the left to hide the identities, left-wing officials, California, to hide the identities of those who commit crimes? When there is a political reason behind the crime itself. Or when it might be used by someone saying, look, California can't even keep its citizens safe. And now, because of some investigating work by Kevin Dalton and an account focusing on kind of bond scam police records, we are now able to not necessarily prove just yet, want to be a little careful here, but all of the evidence really supports this particular assertion. According to the San Bernardino County inmate locator, 21-year-old Jasanpreet Singh was arrested yesterday at just the exact same time and place, just coincidentally, the exact same time and place as the fatal semi-crash on the I-10 freeway that killed 3 people and then sent 3 more to the hospital. Now, there are no charges yet listed online, but the exact same place? I mean, unless there was a guy on the side of the internet, I don't know, trying to sell his body on the corner. I mean, again, just so happens here, it's a kind of a time and place situation. And then, of course, here's the record from the kind of the California automatic record system that someone was able to kind of skim and find this particular information. Now, some other reporting suggests that there was a Sikh Khanda, which is a Middle Eastern Indian kind of religious symbol for the Sikhs, that was hanging in the window of the semi-truck. Footage looks a little grainy and rough for me to really lean in on that one yet. But again, right here at this particular time, while California is continuing to obscure the name of the individual, it just looks a little bit suspicious. Sorry for the awkward commercial breaking radio crew. We got to send you back one more time before we're out for the evening. It's the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal. Now, the left, while all of this is going on, while you should be saying what Bernie Sanders said in the 90s, what Hillary Clinton said in the 90s, we need to have some decent standards for workers in this country who should be expected to speak English, who should be expected to be citizens of this country, who should be expected to assimilate into the United States. These were things that common sense people on the left, Democrats, not just in the Union Belt, but even, again, the progressive socialists like Bernie Sanders were saying back in the 90s, wholeheartedly agreed with it. Barack Obama was saying it in the early and mid-aughts. Democrats are instead going completely in the opposite direction, and in a couple of ways. Over on MSNBC, what's the big focus this morning? Well, take a look for yourself.
It really is incredible when you have Abigail Spanberger, Mikey Sherrill, her background, all the different jobs that she has held in the military, and also like Alyssa Slotkin. I mean, my God, these women are incredible. And to them, I would say, fight, because we need them. Yeah. We need them leading.
And Mikey is like, she's doing a ton of interviews. You know, when I talked to them, when I was in the car, you know, it was this car, she had gone from interview to interview to.
What they're complaining about right now is the very same thing that Democrats right before an election, the elections they're referring to in Virginia, in New Jersey, various Democrat women who are out there fighting the whoop-de-doo good super-duper fight. They are once again complaining that the ladies of the Democrat Party, right before an election, November 4th, are slipping in the polls and they're unlikable and no one cares for them and their policies are awful. And interview footage comes out showing them supporting assisted suicide and cheating at the Naval Academy scandal style stuff. And then, of course, the refusal to condemn Jay Jones and the threats to kill people and all of these other situations. So Al Sharpton, the race riot master himself, he gets out in front of the crowd and he's got the answer for it all. And his suggestion?
But of course, that does fall into the same misogynistic trap.
Other countries
the suggestion to the panel is that, well, America's misogynistic. They don't like women. They don't want to elect them. Incredible stuff. It's always back to the misogyny thing. Jen Psaki, former Biden press secretary, now struggling in kind of a different network anchor kind of a way. She's spending her time obsessed with J.D. Vance's wife, writing weird fan fictions.
I think the little Manchurian candidate, J.D. Vance, wants to be president more than anything else. Yeah. I always wonder what's going on in the mind of his wife. Like, are you okay? Please blink 4 times.
Yes.
We'll come over here. We'll save you. And that he's willing to do anything to get there. And that your whole iteration you just outlined, I mean, he's scarier in certain ways.
He's smarter.
In some ways. And he's young.
Yeah, and ambitious.
And agile in the sense that he is a chameleon who makes himself into whatever he thinks the audience wants to hear from him. Now, what's also true, though, is J.D. Vance is not, he's in some ways goodish on paper if you like what he believes in. I don't know. But I don't know that he can take the whole movement with him.
No way.
I don't think so either.
There's no riz.
It's got no riz, right?
None.
And he just is a little odd. And
Totally.
so Trump's odd in a different way. So
incredible. We do have to bring the radio crew back from the commercial side of things. I got to talk about that just for a second. I can't help it. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Guys, please don't. Right before the election. Right before the big election, we're going to cover it here, of course, on the Daily Signal. Right before we get into the huge home run swing of the midterm season. Don't do the goofy goober, everyone is sexist to women routine. That Republicans hate women. The right hates women. Oh, the right. That's why Japan just elected their first female prime minister. The right they hate women. Oh, I hate to let you in on a little secret here. That a bunch of catty, complaining, well-to-do, super duper extra college educated, blonde, wrinkly women on the media saying that they think J.D. Vance is weird and Usha, his wife, secretly wants to leave him. Blink if they're... No, that ain't going to do it. It just ain't going to do it for you. Now, what about the rest of the women of the Democrat Party? What are they up to right now? That brings us to Representative LaMonica MacIver. You may remember Representative LaMonica MacIver of New Jersey for, Kool-Aid manning her way through federal agents in New Jersey at the ICE detention facility because they said, you have to tell us in advance if you're coming. And then, throwing her belly forwards. Well, don't take my word for it. I remind you of... There she goes, shoving her way on through. There we go. Boom! Oh, yeah. I, too, enjoy my favorite flavor of Kool-Aid. Felonylicious. Incredible. Well, now that she's, dealing with charges and getting into a little bit of a court situation... She is deeply, deeply scared because, again, cameras everywhere. Kind of can't shake it. When you make ICE the number one issue in the party, expect cameras to be where you're doing your advocacy. Here she is claiming that I could get 17 years in jail. Oh, no.
Again, we're watching what they say, what they are charging, and what they say could you could face 17 years in prison for if we're go forward and to be convicted. Is there any part of your brain that's scared of that, or are you 100% convinced that if you get an opportunity in court with a jury of your peers that you will be acquitted?
Well, one, I'm 100%, I believe 100% the facts are on my side. That's number one. I have faith in my legal team, faith in the judiciary system. However, it is very stressful, Chris. I am a mom, I'm a wife, I have family, and I have never been in trouble with the law ever. And so to hear...
Well, first of all, we have to play, just because every time someone leads out with, I'm this, I'm that, I'm a woman, I'm a mother, I'm... So she gets points for that. And then we're going to take them away because immediately saying that, oh, I could face 17 years. Yeah, that's why they're called felonies. You want to know the number one way, producer Nick, not to get 17 years in prison? Don't commit felonies. I know. I too was shocked about such things. She's having a really, really rough time. We're going to continue the show over on the live stream radio crew as we send you off to the blissful commercial land for the evening. Head over to youtube.com or rumble.com/Daily Signal. Catch our stuff there. We're going to continue on some bonus tonus amid some other fun news of the day. We'll catch you guys on the radio crew side later. Continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Now, in the meantime, LaMonica then had herself a little hootenanny rally. Because, of course, nothing at all matters to liberal women more than affirmation and having people chant how much they love you and how much you're flawless and perfect, easy breezy, beautiful cover girl. And that absolutely happened outside of a facility. Just totally organic goodness here.
We stand with MacIver.
No, that's not Grimace from the McDonald's commercials. That's actually LaMonica MacIver. Sorry, I try to make sure that we accurately describe the individuals on the screen in the purple jumpsuit.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to thank all who are here, for all of my supporters who are here, my husband, my mom, my family. Thank you so much to my legal team. I'm super grateful to them. Look, to all of the elected officials, to my mayor, to my first lady, to my two amazing colleagues who are still here, and my colleagues who had to leave.
By the way, remember a few seconds ago when I said the most important thing to them is affirmation? Now they're in the middle of it. I'd like to thank everybody here. I'd like to thank my second cousin, Jennifer. She told me that I look real good. Thank you. It's just always the same nonsense.
My chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus.
A chairwoman, the doorman, the non-binary coffee table. Thank you.
Because I want to thank you all for being here, for your support. It means so much to me. Look, I'm super grateful for the judge. He listened a lot through this case. He had a lot of questions, and so I'm grateful for...
Yeah, that's what a judge does. The judge, they listened. I'm thankful to the Catholic priest. I went to confession, and he nodded a lot and said, "Bless you, child," and that just spoke to me. Yeah, I mean, that's what they do. Judges, he listened and asked questions. What did you expect them to do? They only dance in drag on Cinemax, hon. I don't know what you're looking for here.
His duty, but I want to be clear to everyone. This process has not stopped me from doing my job. That's right. This process is not going to stop me from doing my job.
Now, that's true. It's not going to stop her at all from continuing to be a representative in the House. Why? Because Republicans are too scared to actually remove her from Congress amid, again, the blatant video evidence in which she body slams federal agents. They couldn't censor her for that. They were ready to throw George Santos out before his conviction. By the way, don't have any particular issue with that. I don't have any issue with throwing someone out of Congress. You don't have a right to be in Congress. If you do something the rest of the body finds abhorrent, let's say you marry your brother. I won't recommend that. Sabalana. I don't recommend you marry your brother. I don't recommend immigration fraud or bank fraud or wire fraud or investment fraud. I don't recommend body slamming federal agents. I don't recommend lying to Congress. There's a lot of things that one might not recommend. But you don't need to be convicted in a court of law in order to no longer deserve your congressional seat. And also, yes, as one of the comments pointed out, she is holding that microphone a little bit like an Academy Award. They're always so proud of themselves. Her statement, however, at the same time is, I'm going to continue to show up to protect us, to protect the people of the 10th Congressional District of New Jersey and of this country, because we need protection. And we have to continue to hold this administration accountable. It's always the same nonsense. The same nonsense. Now, last but certainly not least in this particular vein, the Minnesota Supreme Court has now ruled that the USA powerlifting's ban on men competing in the women's division is discrimination under the state's Human Rights Act. Oh, you already knew that all 7 of the justices of the Supreme Court in Minnesota were like super far left Democrat dudes. And a majority of them, of course, appointed by Tim Walz. Focusing on the key issues right now. So trying to dox federal agents, complaining about the ballroom, complaining yet again that no one's going to vote for their super brat strong like women. Yay, you go girl, because, you know, the country's sexist and racist and stinky. And now, of course, men in women's sports again. The same strategies that have worked so well in the last several elections. And of course, lest we forget the very headline tag of the show, the Democrat whip of the House saying, hey, yeah, sure, families are willing to suffer. It's like Lord Farquaad in Shrek. Some of you may die. That's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. Incredible. Incredible. Have have Senator Jose Tortilla rolling around on the ground again, Maxine Waters crying and wiggling her wrinkly old jowls, Nancy Pelosi yelling at a reporter about the National Guard again, and you've just got a sweepstakes ultimate victory session. I can't possibly fathom how that would go wrong. Oh, wait, there's one more? Of course there's one more. One guy, I believe, running for Congress up in Maine, U.S. Senate hopeful Graham Plattner, apparently got a particular kind of skull and crossbones tattoo during his time in the Marines. He said when he was on shore leave in Serbia. And this particular skull and bones just happens to be the exact same skull and bones that was used by the SS. Like the exact same skull and bones. Now, I remember, producer Nick, you remember just like a couple of days ago when all of these Democrats came out and said, hey, there's elected representatives in this young Republican group chat, and they made a joke about a gas chamber that was really gross and disgusting, and therefore everyone associated with these Republicans, we need to order them to step down if they're in any kind of office. We need to order that they be hanged in the public square. And a lot of Republicans said, well, look, at least I'll say this. Yeah, you're saying things like that, and you're stupid enough to put that in group chats, especially how heinous some of these things were. Yeah, I don't think you should be serving in office. All right, fine.
Well,
whatever.
It's not only that, we recently had people attacking Pete Hegseth for his tattoos on, his chest.
That's right. He had the Jerusalem cross. And we had all of these tattoo experts suggesting...
Which is very clearly a white supremacist symbol.
Oh, yeah. That thing that's been carved into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, or the Church of the Resurrection, as we Protestants would say.
Iconography depicting 3 Jews hung for Roman crimes.
Right, yeah. These particular symbols, clearly white supremacy. But when you have the actual symbol, the actual stamped symbol of the SS... Now, all of a sudden, Bernie Sanders goes out, I've always supported him. I think he's a very good guy. And even if he said that sexual assault in the military never happens, come on, have you served in combat? Bernie Sanders has never served in combat or whatever. He honeymooned in Moscow, for crying out loud. Now, all of a sudden, the standards shift yet again. So first of all, our thoughts and prayers over to the Politico team, who believed that the young Republican group chat story was going to pivot away from Jay Jones, the Virginia Attorney General candidate. Congratulations on that falling right through the floor, because now we have yet another Democrat Senate candidate again in Maine who's having these particular issues. When you make any kind of my entire side is wholly pure and your entire side is a bunch of Nazis argument, and therefore you owe this undying loyalty to never even mention anything that's bad, you're going to run into these exact kind of stories. These stories are prepared for you. When you are the kind of person who says, I can never possibly, the other side is bad, that's where all my energy is focused with, never even possibly say anything bad about anyone on your own side of the aisle, you're going to walk straight into the minefield of whom these stories are prepared exactly for. So for all of the Democrats who took the young Republican story to say, see, all Republicans are terrible, horrible, evil Nazis. Well, I mean, the SS tattooed dude, yikes. Not the Jerusalem cross. You don't find the exact, completely, definitively SS tattoo. Although someone pointed this out today, if one was going to drunkenly, accidentally get a Nazi tattoo, shore leave in Serbia is exactly the place one would go to do that. So, again, massive yikes. Massive, massive yikes. Now, producer Nick, who would be really great to ask about tattoos that certain Marines received in the 90s right now? The Pentagon press office might be really useful. I think we might just shoot over an email and ask about the history. You know who also happens to know a lot about military history and service through the 90s and the early aughts? Why, that would be our own Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, who's taken a lot of time to focus on the guys who were enlisted or young officers, especially NCOs, who served in little conflicts which involved shore leave in places like Serbia. Instead of focusing on whether or not someone's wearing the right skirt in the admiral's office, as Biden administration was so extremely focused on, I actually am kind of interested in hearing about this, instead of whining that no one's going to let us leak national security secrets about strikes against Venezuelan narco-terrorists. Sorry, that was the coming full circle in case you missed it. Now, this brings us to something that I'm really excited to kind of tell you guys a little bit about in the bonus tonus section of the show. Before I get to that, I actually do one thing I want to mention. There was an individual named Vicky who gave a $5 super chat earlier on in the show. Really, really appreciate that, by the way. A little tip on the YouTube. We don't ask y'all to donate those kind of things, but we do try to keep track of who sends them and say thanks, because that supports us monetarily, even though that's, again, we're glad to do this show for you for free. So those things said, into the bonus tonus section of the show, yesterday, I had the opportunity at the invitation of the head of the Indiana chapter for Turning Point USA to head down to Indiana University in Bloomington and attend the Charlie Kirk speaking tour event that was to be hosted by Tucker Carlson. And I was looking forward to it. Producer Nick and I headed on down to IU and had a really great time. Honestly, we were sitting there laughing very loudly. Poor Representative Andrew Ireland of Indiana, state representative, had to deal with us two goobers having a conniption laughing during the entire show. It was an incredible thing because Tucker got up after a series of intros and he elected to do something that I wholly respected. He said, look, I could get up here and I could talk forever, which I very much sympathize with. He said, but I'm going to go straight to the thing that Charlie was really passionate about. I'm going to invite people to go ahead and ask questions, and then I'm going to answer and we're going to talk. And he did the entire time. He gave every single person who asked questions their answers, and he gave them thoughtful answers, and he was very real with them. He was very real with the rest of the crowd. And that was the most entertaining thing I have sat through in months. It was incredible. And by the way, the people who came forward to ask the questions, some real winners who signed up for that particular line. Some real winners. Now, we do have a couple of these clips for you. One, there was a young lady who approached the bench, the microphone, and started asking Tucker about the meaning of woke. And it's probably one of my favorite exchanges to see in kind of recent political history. Here, I think we have this one queued up for you.
I just kind of wanted to ask, I want more insight on this because I think especially in the age of social media, we're hearing a lot of buzzwords. I think a few examples of that would be words like woke or phrases like owning the libs or whatever. You already kind of touched on what your definition of woke is, but I kind of just want to hear more about that and like how is that attacking your freedom of speech? Who are the people that are like a part of this movement that's attacking your freedom of speech? I feel like we hear woke so much, especially from conservatives. I'm personally not one, but we never really hear like what it means. So
well, bless you for asking that question. And just in general, I think that we should demand a definition of terms. Like if you're being attacked for being something, and if you're being punished, especially for being something, it's fair to ask, what do you mean by that thing? Right? You're racist, you're anti-Semitic, okay, well, what is that? Why don't you define it for me? And woke would definitely be in that category. I think thank you for asking that. I can give you the definition that I have in my mind. I think woke has two components. At its core, woke is an attempt by the powerful to make the less powerful shut up. All efforts to stifle speech come from the powerful, not the powerless. What's so interesting about this moment that we live in, this has been true my whole life, really, but it's a new innovation in world history where the powerful use the powerless as a pretext to crush everyone else. So what
May
they
I
do...
ask more about
yes, ma'am.
Well, when you say the powerful and the powerless, generally we associate wokeness, like you guys say it's like more LGBTQ agenda or more diversity of races. How is that the more powerful? Because those are historically oppressed groups of people.
Right. Well, that's, I mean, that may or may not be true depending, I mean, it's probably true in some ways, untrue in others. Certainly not true now.
How is that not true now?
Well, I mean, simply because if you were to, just for example, apply to Stanford Law School, which I would not recommend, but if you were to write an essay about how, growing up queer in a Midwestern farm town.
I've grown up queer in a Midwestern farm.
You should have applied to Stanford Law School. You probably would have gotten in.
So, first of all, producer Nick and I, through the entire thing, were essentially slapping our knees as hard as we physically could because the entire thing was hilarious. It was. And a couple of reasons why here. First of all, props to Tucker for engaging with what were some of the lamest, dumbest reasoning from some of these kids that I have heard in a very long time. I happen to remember when I was at the end of my time in college, when I would see like Ben Shapiro going up to debate some of the college kids, or later on Charlie, Steven Crowder, when he would, he did his Prove Me Wrong series, they would ask questions often that were pretty well put together questions. And there would be a pretty decent argument. Now, again, of course, then, the hammer would come down. But the questions were at least pretty much on par with, all right, these are well thought out questions. Most of these were not. Almost all of these were not. It really kind of shocked me because one would think you'd write this kind of down ahead of time. There was a guy that wrote his question down on his phone, did not help. It was just as awful. And it was a very, very entertaining experience because you had essentially some girl coming up and saying, define woke. And Tucker took the opportunity to say something that I don't agree with, which is that woke is the powerful using the powerless to beat other people up and kind of take away their rights, which I don't necessarily agree with all the time there and through Tucker. And I, by the way, as someone who disagrees with Tucker on a lot of issues, especially his foreign policy, a lot of his kind of deeper conspiracy reaches populism with me to a degree that I really don't care for. I've criticized some of those takes here on the show. But how Tucker handled himself in this particular instance right now, and there's a lot of controversial things that Tucker says, things that I really don't agree with him on, Israel being one of them, for sure. He didn't use the entire event to lean into that stuff at all. He tried pretty hard, especially when he said, he's going to try not to curse from the stage. And there was a couple of slips here and there. He really tried to honor the spirit of what Charlie was doing with those events. And look, you can, even if there was someone who got up there and said all of the kind of things that I agree with politically, but they didn't honor the spirit of how Charlie tried to run those events, that would have been far worse for me. I don't need to agree with Tucker on foreign policy or things that I think, again, you heard him do kind of the Tucker left in the middle of it. We enjoyed that through the entire thing. And by the way, later found out, Tucker enjoys those kind of criticisms as well as I do for a number of the criticisms that I receive. The point that I'm making is that was an excellent event because people showed up with a lot of differing opinions on a lot of things. Some things of which are kind of deal breakers for me in far of the terms of long-term support and such. and still tried to honor Charlie's legacy in a way that matters to me as someone who knew Charlie. And that's worth praising. There were a lot of really good exchanges. There were some things that were interesting. Tucker talked a little bit about the importance of what you create defines you as a people when asked about the ballroom of Trump. And he didn't even say, whether he was for or against the Trump ballroom, but he talked a little bit about how Americans, it matters what you produce as a culture, what you build, the statues you produce, the buildings that you create, the materials that you use. And it was very apolitical in a way that had a lot of common truth that reaches a lot of Americans where they are in general dissatisfaction with what America has become compared to some of the nostalgia of our youth.
The things we make reflect who we are, period. If you want to assess, if you're an archaeologist and you want to know what the Phoenicians were like, you look at what they made. And I hope we're never judged by that standard, because we're not creating beauty now. And that flows from your collective soul. Like, if you have beautiful intent and beautiful thought and beautiful aspirations, you create beautiful things. At its height, the British Empire created the most finely crafted, beautiful, durable things ever made. And now they don't create anything other than finance and bad healthcare. So it really is a measure of your civilization.
There were a lot of moments like that. Now, there were some moments where he said some things that I didn't particularly agree with. Who cares? And I say who cares, by the way, because I've seen a lot of individuals who have claimed that Turning Point shouldn't have hosted Tucker because he said things that are considered gross or egregious, or he's put out some kind of conspiracy theories. Look, if you're expecting me to get out here and defend everything that Tucker has said, you're barking up the wrong tree. There are previous episodes where I've criticized directly certain things. And I am personally biased in this fight, by the way, because when I was fired from Indianapolis Public Schools, along with Charlie, Tucker was one of the people who reached out, not only graciously had me on his show, and insisted that I be on his show even when he wasn't hosting, because he was gone for the holidays, but he insisted that Jesse Waters host me for an interview while he was gone. You don't usually see that kind of personal attention from a host of a show, and then kept up with us afterwards. There's never going to be a scenario in which I'm not thankful for that, regardless of what rabbit holes he goes down. To be very frank and clear with you guys, again, here at the end of the bonus tonus section of the show, I do have a couple of takes from the event as a whole. First of all, Indiana University Police and Indiana University Auditorium Security, you need to step up your game. You need to take things more seriously. Last night, actually, catty corner to us, I posted about this over on X. We are looking into this a little bit as much as we can. There was a young lady who was wearing kind of a larger, looser, green kind of a windbreaker, who Nick looks over to me, gets my attention, and we're at that time finding out that there were internet issues that we were going to have to try to wrestle with remotely, which is a huge problem. And he pointed out this girl was kind of catty corner to us on the other side of the aisle and said she's acting really, really, really weird. And there was a USA Today photographer who was wearing something similar. That's who I thought he was referring to, and that's not who he was referring to. And after a couple of seconds more, this young lady gets up from her chair, sprints to the stage, hops the barrier. This is right before the event began, climbs up on stage. All of the people who are speaking are backstage, right behind the main wall. Not a line of security anywhere like that. There were some cops that were standing near the edge of the front kind of side entrance doors once the event began. But this lady hopped the stage, ran up to the clear podium, and slapped what appeared to be some kind of a book that we later found out she was kind of rifling through right before she went up there, kind of bookmarking, according to two guys who were sitting behind her, who sent me some footage that included her sitting there kind of in passing. And then she ran down and ran right out the one side door that there weren't any kind of police or law enforcement next to, which producer Nick very clearly, or I would say rather astutely pointed out later, that this likely indicates she knew the building pretty well, to know exactly which door to go to, the right door that would get her out of there without any problems the fastest. And she places this book down. Then a security guy, I don't know if it was from TPUSA, don't know if it was from local authority, just went right over to the podium and barehanded grabbed the book and then walked off. No, you don't know if I think, I was, of course, I grew up in the age of the threat of anthrax. You had talked a little bit about possibly an overdose, a high concentration of like fentanyl on the front cover, which would have, if you touch a high concentration of fentanyl, that'll knock you down. And if no one's around with Narcan, it's curtains. So that's a huge security gap. That's a huge security gap. And the outside security coming in was not good. That's not Turning Point USA's fault, by the way. Indiana University Police and the hired services by Indiana University, which you have to use in order to host an event at Indiana University, screwed the pooch. Universities are still not taking this seriously. After the assassination of Charlie Kirk, there are many universities that are hosting conservative events that are not taking this seriously. I know there are event staff of TPUSA watching this right now. Listen to me. You need to make sure that you insist on your own security at these events. Something is going to slip through. Someone out there last night in the pre-live stream and photos was watching, was paying attention, and now knows there are holes, depending on what security universities show up with. After the rise in rhetoric and violence in this country, you need to step up security because the universities are not going to do it for you. So that's number one. Number two, on the matter of people who come up to speak before the actual speaker, before Tucker came up to speak. Governor Mike Braun of Indiana got up to speak. He is not my style of speaker. I like him, voted for him, not my style. Got up there and started off with, oh, Charlie believed in the two things that I ran on, free markets and determination. No. You don't start your speech like that when the guy who did it was just assassinated. You don't talk about your campaign. Stop it. Sorry, the cat in studio is a little annoyed that I've gotten a bit perturbed at this. The audacity to get up after, and I've seen other officials do this at more memorial events for Charlie. Charlie believed in two things very personally. He believed in the freedom of speech, the values of this country, and then his faith. Those were two things that drove everything about him. And within his faith, his passionate love for Erica and his deep devotion to his kids. I like Mike Braun a lot. And I hate that he has to be the one that I'm kind of not going after, but I'm criticizing here in this way. To get up and say he believed in free market, it's not a campaign moment for you to talk about how great it's been being the governor and how successful you are. It's about Charlie. Tucker Carlson, who I disagree with on a ton, who I thought in a lot of ways has gone down some rabbit trails that are kind of kooky, in some ways that I don't care for the kind of populism he's pushed forward. Tucker got right up there and said, I could talk for a while, but instead, Q&A. Let's just do this just like Charlie did. And when he thought he did something that didn't honor the legacy of Charlie, he was like, you know what? I'm really sorry. And then he tried to make amends. Even after there was this one nasty kid who got really mad at Tucker and then took the name of the Lord in vain and said, J.C. Tucker, blah, blah, blah. And Tucker said, nope, you're gone. You're out of here. Nope. Even to that kid, Tucker tried to honor the spirit of Charlie by saying later, like if I was cross or snappy or kind of mean with you, I'm sorry. I don't know if you guys know this. Tucker does not normally do that. But the pre-speaker thing, I'm looking at now. This is not a turning point issue. Not a turning point issue. They didn't script anyone to say anything like that at all. This is a criticism for elected officials who have taken tragic events to say, we stood for the same thing, and then give some kind of like politically whitewashed story about how Bobby Knight said, oh, you better listen to Trump because I'm at a turning point event at Indiana University. Stop it. Stop the pandering nonsense. I hate it when teachers do it. I didn't like it when administrators do it. I hate it when politicians do that. I hate it. This is why I am so against political events at churches. I hate them. I don't. As a Baptist who believes Christians should be very invested in aspects of the faith in their churches, that steams me. That is. Just to be clear on that particular side of things. And by the way, I do absolutely understand that some of the comments are probably not super, thrilled with my take on here. Totally fine. I'm never going to bend what it is that I'm saying in order to evoke some kind of a reaction from y'all. That's what we try to do here on the show, is just to be transparent, share the news that we have, the analysis that we have, and deliver that. My last take on the kind of event yesterday evening. Right now in our country, there is an opportunity to essentially look at what's all gone wrong. And you can believe so passionately what has all gone wrong that you paint a picture of who people need to go after in order to bridge common ground. there's also a counter movement to essentially say, if there is someone that I don't like, that I disagree with, then they need to be completely removed from the space. And everyone is essentially, that I have seen in that side of the debate, that's either cutting people completely off or this kind of weird ecumenicalism where like, well, the left and the right are really the same. It's your overlords who hate you. Both of those theories I think are wrong. Both of those theories I think are wrong. I am friendly with Tucker. We spoke before on stage. We've texted after. Tucker knows there's things that I disagree with him on. Some things really vehemently. I don't believe in treating him just like dog filth. I don't. I'm going to call him out on things that I don't like. And by the way, I'm not going to then turn around to him again, as I've pointed out before. You know, when Tucker and I have spoken, he knows very clearly things I disagree with him on, things that I agree with him on. And he feels the same way. There's no reason to go out there and completely hack and slash everyone that you disagree with. On the other side, and this is the thing that I disagree with Tucker on, the idea there's this ecumenicalism, like, well, you on the left, you know, you're being manipulated by people who want the worst for you, and really we're all together against the crew of oligarchs. I don't believe that either. I don't believe that either. I do not believe you always need to go conspiracy hunting. Sometimes there are people who hate you, who want to kill you, and they will tell you why, and then they will try to do it in front of you. You don't have to go on an investigation for that. You don't have to. If someone comes up and says, I believe that you're trying to kill all trans people and I'm going to throw a brick at you first, guys, there's no hiding the ball there. You don't have to go, well, I bet the CIA MK Ultra'd her to get radical. Or the insanity of the trans communities fried her brain. Now she's out there shoving a banana in her pants saying she's going to throw a brick at you if you don't call her Ron. No, there's no secret whatever for that. And by the way, is that, am I saying that there are no oligarchs in this country and there are no people that are out to just make wealth for themselves and hurt everyone? They don't care. They'll step on, screw over whomever. Like we've talked about the real estate people, producer Nick, the individuals who are buying up property across the country in order to create mass rental structures. No, I'm not defending them at all. I find a lot of that stuff disgusting. I do. But once you get into this weird kind of like, well, it's really just the average person versus just the rich people. I mean, the French tried that one, homie. It got really ugly and solved absolutely nothing. And just a new nobility rose. The Soviets tried this once, twice, 3 times. Solved absolutely nothing. America tried this in the 70s. Solved nothing. I'm just making the case that either of those two sides, you have to trim everything down and cut everyone off, and then actually we're all the same and it's the secret cabal that you have to worry about. You don't have to buy into either of those. Nah. It's not that serious. Again, there are very present threats right now that I think are a little bit more worthwhile. And by the way, I am the guy who just reported the individuals that are funding the No Kings protests. I have no problem calling out billionaires whatsoever, anytime. But claiming that individuals who have billions are in fact the problem, nah, not for me. All right, that's enough on the rant side of things this evening. Those are kind of my thoughts post Tucker. I had a great time. Producer Nick, we had a really, really good time. Tucker said a lot of fun things that are not like the hyper controversial stuff that was just excellent. And it was good. It was a good time. And with that said, I think we're going to call it an evening. We'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same place. I think we've got some special guests lined up tomorrow. Maybe not. Anytime you announce a guest beforehand, they end up canceling 15 minutes before. So we're not going to do it. You'll have to tune in. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Y'all take care.